Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to talk about board games in secondary school and in higher education. And my name is Helena Lennholm, and I'm from the Institute of Technology.
And I'm John-Erik Dolin. We have two affiliations, two logotypes in our presentations here. Both the Royal Institute of Technology, KTH, where I was also formerly a faculty member, but also Snowflake Education, which is the company that I run presently. So we're going to talk about board games for sustainability education, both from both the board games and the sustainability education might be interesting parts of it. So we're going to start with just a short introduction of who we are.
Oops. Yeah. Okay. So I used to be a wood chemist and an associate professor in that profession, and that was for 15 years ago. I changed and became a secondary school teacher in chemistry and natural sciences, and I've been working like that for 15 years. And for a year ago, I changed and started to work at KTH instead. And I'm a program director of the program that we have, where we have a combination of to become a civil engineer and a teacher. And I also teach them, and it's chemistry and technology didactics. And my focus is sustainable development, and that is how I make it actually.
Yeah, that's my core subject as well. So I'm John-Erik Dolin. I actually have a background as a physicist and from KTH, but I've been teaching sustainable development for about 10 years or so at KTH. So I've thought about a lot about how to teach sustainable development. That is difficult for several reasons and very specific reasons. And I think that we have come up with some pretty good solutions how to address these issues. And we've done this a lot at KTH. So I have noticed that people are very interested in these solutions that we have come up with. So I started Snowflake Education 2 years ago in order to spread these ideas to a broader audience of teachers around the world. So the objective is to help educators to integrate sustainability in their classroom in a good way. So that's the background about who we are and where we come from. So let's just start with the specific difficulties that we have seen in addressing sustainability in education in general. And we worked in both higher education and secondary education. So we'll share some experiences from both arenas. So sustainable development is it's a subject that is integrated more and more into education in general, and it should be, it really should. But it's difficult, partly because it's not its own subject. And I think it shouldn't be. It's part of every subject. So it's something, there's always a sustainability point of view on everything we do in the curriculum. So integrating sustainability is actually doing it in a good way in each and every subject that we teach. So there are a couple of very specific challenges here as an educator. And the first, perhaps, is that sustainable development is to a large extent a subject of values. And it can be difficult to educate students how to address values. Because values stand back to opinions and perhaps even ideologies. And it's difficult to address those issues. Because you have your own opinions, so students might have their own opinions, and they might be different or the same, and you want to do this in a way that is good for education. And second, these issues that we sort under the word sustainability, they are often very complex. So they are holistic. They are addressing many aspects of a subject, and they are addressing many subjects. So how do you address those issues within the subjects that you teach? And traditionally, many subjects are oriented towards problem solving, and sustainability has to do with the broader skills, and you don't want to squeeze them into your narrow subject, but you want to integrate them in a way that is relevant for the students, for the teachers, and for the subject that you teach. And all these are very difficult challenges to address. So how do you teach values and complexity within your subject? This is the agenda that we'll go through. So we will describe shortly the framework that we have developed. And it started at KTH, and we are now taking it into Snowflake Education. And then we will describe 2 studies that we have performed. So we will describe some work that we've done, Helena in secondary education, and I will describe a study performed in higher education to kind of try to benchmark the procedures that we have developed. And we'll end with some conclusions and questions, of course. So we have introduced board games to our students, and we have 2 of the games we have in the classroom here. We also have a booth, actually, KTH and Snowflake together, out there in the mingle area. So please drop by and look at the games if you haven't already done so. So we have 4 games on display there, and we will describe 2 of them here in a little while. So these games are very good for doing active learning, doing activities that for active learning in the classroom. But the games are not something that you do isolated. So we have kind of a framework, and we have developed this into a module. At KTH, we are delivering this Introduction to Sustainability module in about a dozen or so engineering programs. So this is something that you can integrate into the program. So this is an introduction module to sustainable development that we have early in the education programs. And the idea is that this will give the students a foundation for the basic and key sustainability issues that they can then relate to later on in their education. That actually sustainability will run as a red thread throughout education. So it's based around a number of learning packages. And we are developing these learning packages so that they should be easy to take from this context, perhaps drop them into another context, and maybe change them a little bit to fit the particular context that you're using them in. So let's zoom in on one of these learning packages and see what we have in there. And there are actually 3 parts. And in the core, we have a seminar, an active learning seminar where we play board games with the students. A typical seminar, we typically schedule 3 or 4 hours when we can. Sometimes it's shorter. It depends a little bit on reality. But if we can, we schedule 3 or 4 hours with our students. And playing the game takes, in most cases, perhaps 1.5 hours or so. So it's part of the seminar. It's not the whole seminar. So before we play the game, we also have an introduction part that could be a short lecture, but it's mostly discussions and group discussions around some kind of preparatory work that students have done before they come to class. And after the game, we have perhaps the most important part of the seminar, the debriefing. Yes?
So this is in teacher education or in school?
It can be in
both. Yeah.
I always use it in teacher education.
Mm-hmm.
It can be in many different audiences. So my experience is mostly for engineering education, but you have other.
I've done it with secondary school, but also nowadays in teacher education.
So we use a flipped classroom concept and use a blended learning approach. So before how does this work on the Mac? Right. Okay. So before the students enter the classroom, before they come to the game seminar, they must prepare. And with the higher education students, it's easy to give them quite a lot of preparatory work. With secondary school pupils, some of this can be done as a classroom activity instead. So depending on the target group, we can make this different. But the idea is that the game seminar is a very active part, and the debriefing is where a lot of the actual learning happens. But before you can do that, you must prepare the students, and then we can do that as a flipped classroom concept, and we give them online lectures, preparatory work to do, and some readings and some reflections to do before they come to class. And then we have the game seminar, and after the game seminar, we have the third part in the sequence, which is the follow-up part. And that here is where we connect these often very generic, the very generic knowledge to the specific knowledge, the specific context of the course that we integrate this learning package within. So this is the whole concept, so to say. So the game fits in the middle as part of it. Let's see. So this is one of the learning packages, and then we can build a whole course if we want to do that, or we can just use one of these seminars depending on the context. So talking about games a little bit. Here are some of the games that we use. So educational games, as such, they can be very efficient tools for learning. There are strong results in favor of using games, and there are actually a lot of literature backing that up. It is also a very good platform for interpersonal interaction. Of course, it's a very social thing to do in the classroom. You can use games to simulate the situation that would be very difficult to do and deliver as a safe learning experience for students. And also, but at the end of the day, using these games and telling people how much good experience we have about them, of course the valid question is to ask how much better, are games better than traditional teaching, or how much better are they really? So we've tried to do our best to answer that question. I will let you know a little bit about our personal experience and some studies that we have performed to trying to evaluate how much better games actually are.
Okay, so now Jan-Erik has told you some of the sort of overview things, and now I'm going to give you more specific example. But first I would like to know how many of you are teachers in upper secondary school, gymnasiet, högstadiet? And are you teachers in higher education? Okay, so this is what I thought that we would have in this. And my example comes from upper secondary school, but since I also work with teacher education, I can say right away that I use it there too, but mainly to show teachers how they can use this in the classroom if they want to, because you just said that how much better is this, and my personal view is that you have to combine different teaching techniques depending what kind of group you have, and so on. Okay, so when I have been working as chemistry and a natural science teacher, and then you have to, chemists like to think that they are very good at sustainable development, and we are, but we are mainly good at ecological sustainability. I now say, you might not agree. But the thing is that if you want to sort of encompass the whole sustainability in another sense, you have to do it interdisciplinary, I think. And that might be very hard to do in a school. I've been working hard to do that. Maybe your physics teacher is interested a little, maybe biology teacher is interested, maybe the Swedish teacher is interested. So it can work, and it can also not work at all. And to have a game, it's really good to say to the Swedish teacher, okay, so let's make a common lesson where we play this game. And this is a little about argumentation analysis, and we have a bit of chemistry and things like that. So I think this is a good tool just to achieve this interdisciplinary thing then. And also, as Jan-Erik said, you have these normative issues, because I, as a chemistry teacher, I think it's very uncomfortable that my students think something about recycling. they have views about this that might not agree with my own. But this game, it sort of encompasses this. Then they get to have a role when they get a dilemma to argue about, and they can sort of, I can work with this, and afterward I can just ask them, what did you think? And so you can get this discussion. So for me as a natural science teacher, it's easier to address these things, I think. You can have a progression, and Jon-Erik told you about this learning package. You can play the dilemma at least 3 times, when I say at least, and then we have the other games too, with different questions and different dilemmas, so you can have a progression. And also I like this active learning, and what I said before, I like to be able to vary teaching methods. Yeah, okay, next. So this is an example where we actually played with all the year 1 and year 2 pupils in secondary school. They were both from the technique program and were also social sciences and then economics program. So we actually did 7 classes in one day. And this is just one of the questions, and I just asked them sort of what do they prefer. And a lot of them did prefer dilemma. But of course, they are so different. They don't all prefer this. Some of them prefer the lecture. And I guess this comes back to sometimes they think that they need to know more. They didn't all look at Jon-Erik's films before, so they needed to know more. But I again think it's the majority liked it better, and I think it's another way, at least. Yeah, and yes. And this is sort of the same kind of thing that Jon-Erik described. I just tried to focus it a little more. How should you do? Because my colleagues would ask me, well, do they really learn something about sustainability when they have played the game once? And the answer is, of course, not so much. So you would like to encompass it into your course. And what you do then is that you first, as Jon-Erik said, you ask the students have to prepare. And if this is a natural science class, maybe you can give them an assignment. If you have a technical class, maybe you have a classroom discussion, whatever, but some preparation. And then when you come to the game seminar, first again you have this small lecture, and then they play. And then afterwards we have the debriefing. And this is, as Jon-Erik says, will it take 3-4 hours? Well, I have actually, you can do it in a lesson of 1 hour if you are really efficient. It is possible. Important thing is the follow-up, right? Because here you can actually give out assignments, and you can use this for setting your marks that you need. And I think this is a good way. Now we have had this, and you can have a little grade in chemistry, maybe you can have one in Swedish too if you do it into this disciplinary. And I am prepared. I have sort of these kind of assignments, and Jon-Erik will show you one here quickly. And if you want, you can just come to me and you will get them, because I'm really anxious to for you if you wanted to work with this. This is a kind of this is a preparatory work, and I use the chemistry then, of course. And then if this is, as I said, maybe natural science class, I can ask them to hand in a written assignment. Actions needed for a pulp and paper company that makes and manufactures paper. And of course I have gone through with them how to make, maybe we have even made paper in the lab. And then what kind of chemistry dilemmas, and then you sort of open up. And we had it in, and then you can look at it, you can play the seminar, or play the game with them. And then maybe you can again hand out something like this that you actually take in grade. So you will, then you sort of have anchored it in your course, and maybe, as I said, maybe the Swedish teacher can do the same. And I try to promote this way. And if you're interested, I have such examples, not only from chemistry, so you can talk to me later. We have, as Jon-Erik said, a booth outside. Yeah, I think that was me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So my experience is mostly for using it in higher education. So I was teaching in mechanical engineering when I was starting to experiment with games for sustainability education. So the question always pop up, how good are they? So we have tried to do our best to measure how good they are. So just from our hunch, from our feeling, are using the games with, for me personally, around 1,000 students a year, I think. I think that the games are more effective as a teaching tool for education in sustainable development in particular than traditional teaching. So that's my hypothesis, and I want to try to test that one. And in particular, if I take this into points, I think that games are well suited for learning towards specifically the following learning objectives. This is how I have used them, at least in my teaching. One, learning to comprehend different perspectives and attitudes and values concerning sustainability issues. So that's the difficult part about values and perhaps even ideological questions. And second, learning to understand complexity and systems thinking. I think these two are really, really important to even being able to start to address the sustainability issues. To being able to work with values, opposing values, and to actually comprehend systems. I think this is the most important, and also perhaps also the most difficult one. But also three, that I think they promote the general awareness of sustainability and for learning basic facts, which is also very important. So we performed a study on this, and we used these two games that we have here. It's Dilemma and Fish Banks. And Dilemma, it's a question-based game, so there are cards. We have both of them outside if you want to look at them more thoroughly. So there are a lot of cards in Dilemma. Some of them are fact-based cards, so they're like quiz questions. You get questions around sustainability, and you answer them. And hopefully you learn a little bit, but also you get to know what you know and what you don't know. And there are also dilemmas in the game Dilemma. So there are discussion issues that doesn't have a right or wrong answer to them, but that you have to discuss and debate in a structured form. And it's very, very much inspired by the debating contents, if you know those contests. And Fish Banks, it's around learning systems and complex systems. It's about fisheries, and the students play in groups, each being representing a fishing company. And they buy fishing vessels and send them out to sea. They fish the ocean, and usually the ocean ends up empty of fish. It doesn't have to be like that. The game is not predestined that must happen, but it usually happens for the same reasons as it does in reality. So you can start to discuss things like the tragedy of the commons and what kind of drivers there are for individuals to do specific things, and how to avoid these things in reality. But also to start to talk about systems and system dynamics and how systems come into play in our society. So that game is a product of our own development, and this one comes from MIT, from Dennis Meadows, if you might have heard of him. That's a Dennis Meadows. So what we did in this study was that we had 3 courses where I was responsible for a sustainability module. So in all 3 courses we had 1.5 credit module that would introduce sustainable development for the students for the first time in their studies. So we have had a golden opportunity here to actually test our hypothesis. So we could play around a little bit with these, with how we performed this. So in the red one above, it's first year students. There were 102 of them. It's a 3-year program, and the admission score for entering that program was 11.8 on a scale going up to 20. The yellow one was a 5-year program, so it's a different kind of program with a much higher admission score, but it was otherwise very similar circumstances as the red one. So there were both of those were actually in mechanical engineering, very similar kind of courses they were taking, and both were first-year students in the same part of their studies, but with different groups. You can see the different admission scores. It's different. You can say that they have a slightly different background. And the green one on the bottom, we had second-year students on a program that was very similar to the yellow one, a 5-year program with a high admission score as well. And we had the same. The module was on the surface the same in all 3 cases, but we had the opportunity to use the third there, the green one, as a control group. So we had the same learning objectives, the same activities, the same assessment. Everything was the same, except we had board game seminars in the first 2 cases, and we brought out those and had traditional education lectures covering the same stuff in the third one. So it's very difficult to do controlled experiments with human beings, of course, but this is as close as we could come to doing something that could be similar to an experiment in this way. And we examined this with a survey. So we asked the students the same questions before and after each course. And we also measured how they performed on the exam. And we also, which was a knowledge-based exam, a multiple choice exam. And we also examined their homework assignments, which was also a very important part of the assessment in these courses. Just going through these results quickly, we had a couple of interesting survey questions that we could just look at. And the first one there is just how good is your general understanding for sustainable development? Asking that to the students. And you could see that they would answer on a 5-grade scale. And it's very interesting to see that all the 3 groups were quite similar before they took any courses. It's more or less a normal distribution. And after they took the course, the weight shifted from 3 as the top to 4 in all 3 courses. So all 3 groups experienced that they actually learned something. They experienced themselves that they learned something. That's good. Well, it doesn't make games better than anything else so far. So the second question, how important do you think that sustainable development will be in your future professional life, is the full question. And here you can see that most students actually put a 5 on their, the weight is towards the 5 in all cases, except actually this one. Here you see a small drop to the left, which I can't explain, but it's kind of interesting there. But you can see that students think that it's important for them, and after the course, in at least 2 cases, they were even more convinced that this is actually very important for us. It will be important. And the third question that also is interesting, and also interesting to compare to the previous one, is how important do you think that your future employer will think that it is that you know sustainable development? And here also everything leans towards the right. So students think that their future employer will think it's important that they know sustainability, but actually the weight is on 4. Whereas in the previous slide, the weight was on 5. So I could actually interpret this like students themselves, they realize how important this is. And I think that their future employers also realize it, but not quite as good as they. You could, if I'm taking some freedom. So this is interesting, but it's not really saying that much, and it's not really saying that much in favor of the games so far, but the most important evidence I think we have is the actual exam, where we measured how much the students actually learned. So this is actually very good numbers for us. So the green one is the course where we didn't use the games. Remember. So we used games in the red one and the yellow one, but not in the green one. And the pass score you see to the right, that is actually a lot higher in the groups where we use the game instead of traditional teaching. And also, remember that the red one has a high admission score, so it's really strong students to start with. And the green one also had a very high admission score to start with. And they were second year students. So the green ones, it's you could have, it would be reasonable to think that they would score the highest of all, because they are much more experienced students. They have done more than 1.5 years at least on the program, whereas the others have not even, they are on the first semester. So it's quite a big difference between how far they come. So this is really interesting as such. I think this is the strongest results in favor of the games. We also measure the assignments. The assignments should measure, or they measure how well, critical thinking and the reflection and the skills like that. So we can dig a little deeper there. And these results are more difficult to interpret, I think. But at least you can see that it's not very difficult to understand that the yellow course reaches a higher score than the red one, because they have done the same. Nothing is different in the education we gave them, but there is difference in admission score. But you could have expected that the green course would reach a lot higher than both the red one and the yellow one, because they have come more than a year further in their education. But they are actually not scoring higher at all. They are scoring on the same level as the first year students that have just recently entered university. So it's maybe it's a little. It's difficult to say that this is actually only because of the games, of course, but it is as close as we can come to some kind of controlled experiment. We have only altered one parameter. Yeah, exactly. So if you're going to try to conclude anything around this, so at least under these circumstances, we can see that games are more effective than traditional teaching methods using the things that we can measure. And we can see that students playing games, they perform better at the knowledge test. That's quite clear. We can see that they are probably performing better at the assignment on complexity and critical thinking than they would have been expected to do. But here we should be a little careful, of course, because not least because it's difficult to single out that this is really a causality effect, if it's only a correlation effect or what it is. So, sorry?
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. And I would say that I would very much like to study these things also in after secondary school. It's a little hard because we don't have, as you can see in KTH, special courses for this. So to really measure if they learn something more, it's more difficult. But I'm still interested if anybody would like to work with it. So, let's say the word.
Yeah. What we do see is, of course, that playing games increase the number of interactions between students. And playing games lead to more discussions on the topic. That's very obvious also. So we do get the answer from the students that they think it's fun, and they themselves think it's they learn and they like it. I think these results at least suggest that there might be something really good at. We do have links you can go through.
Yeah, maybe would like to give us some feedback. I don't know if you can use any of those. Yeah.
So
Can you go back to
type
your
of question.
conclusion?
Sure.
Can you go back to your conclusion?
Yes.
First, I would like to say both of us are environmentalists and geographers in high school. You said about interdisciplinary subject. I like that idea, but I feel that one very important subject is either you have not mentioned it, geography.
Oh, I didn't measure so many subjects.
Yeah,
Just-
geography.
Yeah,
For your
geography is good.
information, in
Yeah.
the 90s, the Swedes were very crazy that they want to substitute geography with sustainable development. And there was a lot of cry.
Yeah.
And finally, geography stayed, followed by operating also stayed. The reason why I'm saying that is it will give you the human aspect of it, for example. Without the human aspect of it, I like these games, they are fantastic, but I think the traditional teaching methods of creating the change of attitude in their minds, creating the ideas of values, making them understand about sustainable development, taking the three sectors of environment, economy, and society. That is the base of it, I think.
Yep.
Okay, so if you include social scientists, and especially geographers, I'm not saying about us, that would be extremely good to make it complete. Then you mentioned about the preparatory thing, which is fantastic, but I think you have got so many clips, so many videos, because when I show my students, they really get excited about doing something. Now, mine is the traditional one, and I thought if I would have this games, for example, then it would be complete.
Yeah. Thank you.
I also agree that geography is really important. Natural science program and the technology program, unfortunately, don't read geography. So, but I would also like geography better.
So in the teaching that I do, we often come in as we get 1.5 credits, 40 hours of time for the students to actually trying to squeeze in something within the program, which is otherwise directed towards something else. So it's a different concept. Yeah.
I have a question. Have you tried to apply this board game in the beginning without any prior information?
Yeah.
In the first?
Yes. Yeah.
And what were the results?
We have tried that, and depending on the target group, that can work. So I would say for freshman students, we've done that, and it can work just as an introduction. I wouldn't say that they learn that much, but you can start a discussion from that point, and then build on that. But if you really want to use it as a tool for learning, it's important to have the preparatory part as well. So it depends on a little bit how you use it, why you use it, and in what context. We have used it in seminar form with more senior target groups, like PhD students, master students, for example. And in those cases, it's much easier to use it in an isolated form. And if we have a 4-hour seminar and we can't get any more time to do anything with the students, doing this is an efficient way to use those 4 hours, I would say. So then you can come in, use this as a starting point for discussion, and because they have a lot of more experience in the backs already. So depending on the context, how much time you're allowed to do, you can use it in different ways. I would argue the most efficient way to use it is to prepare the students before.
Yeah, I also think so, because it is necessary to have a prior basic knowledge in order to think.
Yeah.
And of course, if you have stand, then you'll be able to argue as well.
Yeah.
You need to have a kind of base knowledge.
Definitely. And I think you scale up or down your expectations for what the game will give you, depending on how much else you do. So the game is not it's not a silver bullet that will do it for you. It's something that you can use as a complement for other things.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Now I would also like to say that it is okay just to play the game without any prior, but that is not so good. But what you should do then is maybe to play it again later. But often they will be frustrated because they don't know all the answers. So if you sort of prepare them by saying this, oh, we're going to play this game. But I
These
think
games
then
in market, by the way. Can one buy them? Can one buy them?
Of course.
Are they? Can
Yeah.
you find them in?
Just come to our booth. But then you can play it several times. This is what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can buy them. Yeah.
Thank you for
Thank you
your
very much.
attention.